Welcome to our deep dive into the world of Charles the Bald.
Ooh,
We're going behind the scenes of the ninth century
well,
through a collection of his letters.
okay.
Everything from personal notes to political decrees.
Interesting.
I have to admit, medieval history wasn't exactly my go-to topic.
Oh.
But these letters are a total roller coaster.
Huh.
Betrayal, power struggles, Viking raids,
Wow.
even some fashion critiques thrown in for good measure.
It's amazing what these letters reveal, not just about Charles's life,
Yeah.
but about the entire fabric of his society.
Mm.
We see the immense power of the church,
Right.
how religion and politics were inseparable,
Yeah.
and how personal relationships could make or break a king.
Okay, so let's start with something that grabbed my attention right away.
Right.
Charles's letter to the Pope about Bishop Adventius.
Okay.
This bishop was in hot water,
Uh-huh.
possibly involved in some shady dealings.
Oh,
And Charles is practically begging the Pope to give him another chance. There's even mention of Charles's uncle Drogo and some special privileges Drogo had secured from the Pope.
yeah.
What's the backstory there?
Wait.
And why is Charles so invested in this bishop?
Drogo was a powerful figure in the church,
Okay.
and those special privileges he received from the Pope
Right.
essentially gave him a degree of autonomy in his territory.
I see.
When Drogo died, those privileges reverted back to the Pope.
Hmm.
And now, Bishop Adventius, who was closely associated with Drogo,
Mm-hmm.
is in a precarious position.
Oh.
Charles is stepping in to protect Adventius,
Okay.
likely because he sees him as a valuable ally
Yeah.
and wants to maintain those established networks of power and influence.
So it's not just about mercy or friendship.
Right.
It's strategic.
Exactly.
Charles is playing the long game.
And you can see how skillfully he does it.
Mm-hmm.
He reminds the Pope of the strong relationship between the church and his family,
Right.
even invoking the legacy of his grandfather, Charlemagne. He's appealing to a sense of history and obligation,
Yeah.
demonstrating how even back then,
Yeah.
personal connections were crucial in the world of politics.
It's like he's saying, hey, remember all the good things my family has done for the church.
Yeah,
Let's not forget those favors.
precisely.
Hmm.
And it highlights a key takeaway for us today:
Okay.
the enduring importance of relationships and networking.
Right.
Whether it's the 9th century or the 21st,
Yeah.
building and maintaining strong connections can be crucial to achieving your goals.
Speaking of achieving goals, let's move on to another letter that paints a vivid picture of the challenges Charles faced.
Right.
His decree against looting.
Okay.
You'd think this would be a simple issue.
Yeah.
But Charles is pointing fingers at both Viking raiders.
Uh-huh.
And get this,
Look at that.
people who are supposed to be protecting the kingdom.
Oh, no.
He even threatens excommunication for anyone who disobeys.
Wow.
It's like he's trying to wrangle a bunch of unruly cats.
It really underscores the precariousness of Charles's position.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, you have the Vikings,
Yeah.
a constant external threat, wreaking havoc and undermining his authority.
Right.
On the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
you have internal corruption and lawlessness, further destabilizing his kingdom.
Wow.
This decree is a window into his struggle to maintain order in a chaotic world,
Right.
using both religious and secular authority to enforce his will.
It's fascinating how this connects to modern-day issues.
Yeah.
We still grapple with law enforcement crime and the balance of power. It makes you wonder, how effective were Charles's methods?
Well,
What were the consequences for those who dared to disobey?
the effectiveness of his methods is debatable.
Okay.
While the threat of excommunication was a powerful tool in his arsenal,
Right.
enforcing it across a vast and often unruly kingdom was no easy feat.
I see.
The consequences for disobedience could range from fines and confiscation of property to imprisonment and even death, depending on the severity of the offense and the whims of local authorities.
So even with his decree, there was no guarantee of swift justice.
Right.
It's a reminder that power, even in the hands of a king, has its limits.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And it speaks to the complexities of leadership,
Yeah.
even with the best intentions and the strongest pronouncements.
Mm-hmm.
Achieving lasting order and security was a constant battle for rulers like Charles.
And sometimes even those closest to you can become your biggest threat.
Oh,
Which brings us to the story of Archbishop Ebbo of Rheims.
okay.
Talk about a plot twist.
Oh, yeah.
This is the guy who actually crowned Charles,
Wow.
then turned around and helped depose him,
Huh.
and ended up having to beg for his life.
Oh, my goodness.
It's something straight out of a Shakespearean drama.
It really is.
What drove Ebbo to such extremes,
Mm.
and how did he manage to escape Charles's wrath?
Ebo's story is a prime example of the shifting allegiances and power struggles that defined this era.
Yeah.
We don't have all the details, but it seems likely that Ebo saw an opportunity to increase his own power and influence by aligning himself with Charles's rivals.
I see.
When those rivals gained the upper hand,
Yeah.
Ebo benefited.
Right.
But when the tide turned back in Charles's favor, Ebo found himself in a very dangerous position.
Wow.
His survival likely depended on a combination of cunning political maneuvering and perhaps even a genuine plea for mercy.
It's amazing how these letters aren't just about historical events. They're about the personalities and the raw emotions driving those events.
That's right.
We're not just reading a textbook.
Right.
We're practically hearing Charles's voice as he recounts these betrayals and power plays.
And that's what makes them so valuable.
Yeah.
They provide a visceral human connection to the past,
Right.
allowing us to glimpse the motivations and anxieties of those who lived through these tumultuous times. Yeah.
It's like we're getting a front row seat to the drama of the 9th century. And speaking of drama, let's talk about Charles's relationship with the Pope.
Okay.
It wasn't all smooth sailing, was it?
Right.
I mean, this is the guy who could excommunicate you.
Oh, yeah.
Not someone you want to be on bad terms with.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Charles needed the Pope's support to legitimize his rule,
Right.
especially when it came to dealing with powerful figures within the church.
Right.
But the Pope wasn't just a rubber stamp for Charles's decisions.
Yeah, there's this whole conflict over Bishop Hincmar of Leon that really highlights the tension between them.
Yeah.
What was the issue there,
Yeah.
and why did it become such a sticking point?
Bishop Hincmar was a bit of a controversial figure.
Okay.
Charles wanted him removed from his position,
Right.
possibly due to some questionable actions or alliances.
Hmm.
But Pope Adrian II wasn't so quick to comply.
Oh,
This sparked a power struggle between secular and religious authority,
I see.
with Charles feeling that the Pope was overstepping his boundaries
Yeah.
and interfering in the affairs of the Frankish kingdom.
You can practically feel Charles's frustration in his letter to the Pope. He even accuses the Pope of being too quick to believe Charles's enemies
Wow.
and not respecting the historical power of Frankish kings. It sounds like Charles is trying to put the Pope back in his place,
Right.
reminding him who's really in charge.
It's a delicate dance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Charles needs the church's support,
Right.
but he also needs to assert his own authority as king.
Right.
It's a tension that many rulers throughout history have faced,
Yeah.
balancing the demands of both the spiritual and the temporal realms.
And it's not just about abstract concepts like authority.
Right.
These conflicts had real-world consequences. Remember the case of Wolfad and the Church of Bourges? Charles was so impressed with Wolfad's abilities
Yeah.
that he went ahead and entrusted him with the church,
Yeah.
even though the Pope hadn't officially approved his restoration.
That's a great example of how practical considerations could sometimes override strict adherence to protocol. It seems Charles was willing to take a calculated risk,
Yeah.
prioritizing the immediate needs of his kingdom over potential pushback from the Pope.
And it paid off, right?
Indeed.
He eventually convinced the Pope to give Wolfad the official seal of approval.
It speaks to Charles's persistence,
Yeah.
his ability to make a compelling case, and perhaps even his willingness to test the boundaries of his relationship with the Pope.
It's amazing how these letters reveal these nuances of Charles's character. We see him as a shrewd politician, a devout Christian,
Right.
and a leader who's not afraid to make tough calls,
Yeah.
even if it means ruffling a few feathers.
Absolutely.
He's not just a name in a history book.
Right.
He's a complex individual grappling with real-world challenges and making decisions that shaped the course of history.
And he's doing all of this against a backdrop of constant threats,
Right.
both from within and outside his kingdom.
Yeah, we've talked about the Vikings,
Yeah.
but there were also internal rebellions, power struggles between nobles, and even challenges to his authority from within his own family.
Wow.
It makes you wonder how he ever knew any sleep.
It's a testament to his resilience,
Yeah.
his political acumen,
Right.
and his ability to navigate a constantly shifting landscape of alliances and rivalries.
And let's not forget about his faith.
Right.
You mentioned earlier how religion was woven into every aspect of life back then.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a personal belief system. It was a political force to be reckoned with.
Exactly.
Charles saw himself as a divinely appointed ruler
Mm-hmm.
responsible for not only the well-being of his kingdom,
Yeah.
but also the spiritual health of his people.
Right.
His letters are filled with references to God's scripture
Mm.
and the importance of upholding Christian values.
It's a stark contrast to our modern-day concept of the separation of church and state.
Absolutely.
In Charles's time, the two were inseparable.
Yeah.
Religious authority was intertwined with political power,
Right.
and the church played a central role in shaping the moral and social fabric of society.
So when we read about these conflicts over bishops and church appointments, it's not just about personalities clashing.
Right.
It's about a fundamental struggle for power and influence.
Precisely.
These conflicts were about who held the real authority,
Yeah.
who had the final say in matters of faith and governance.
And sometimes those conflicts could get pretty heated.
Yeah.
I mean, Charles doesn't hold back in his letters to the Pope.
Right.
He's clearly frustrated, even angry at times.
Right. But it's not just anger, is it?
That's a great observation.
There's a sense of desperation, too.
Yeah.
Almost like he's pleading for understanding and support.
Remember, Charles is facing challenges on multiple fronts. He's dealing with Viking raids, internal rebellions, and now this tension with the Pope.
Yeah.
His letters reveal not only his political savvy,
Right.
but also his human vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
He's a leader who feels the weight of responsibility,
Yeah.
the pressure of trying to hold his kingdom together amidst a storm of crises.
It's a side of Charles we don't often see in history books. It makes you realize that these weren't just abstract historical figures.
Yeah.
They were real people with real emotions dealing with incredibly difficult situations.
And that's the power of these letters. They provide a window into the human experience of leadership,
Right.
the burdens of power,
Yeah.
the constant struggle to maintain order in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
It's incredible how these letters bring the past to life. You start to see these historical figures not just as names in a textbook, but as real people with their own quirks and personalities.
You're absolutely right. We often think of the medieval world as this dark, dreary place,
Yeah.
but these letters show moments of humor, compassion, even a touch of vanity.
Oh, you mean like that letter where Charles is practically scolding his nobles for their fashion choices? He compares them to pagans and says their outrageous clothes are an insult to God.
Right.
It's like, he's saying, come on, guys, have some self-respect.
Exactly. It shows that even back then, people cared about appearances and fitting in with the right crowd. And Charles, as a king who saw himself as a defender of Christian values,
Yeah.
felt a responsibility to uphold certain standards of decorum,
Right. But
even in matters of fashion.
it's a reminder that people haven't really changed that much, have they?
Nope.
We still worry about what we wear, how we're perceived, and whether we're measuring up to societal expectations.
It's a universal human experience.
Yeah.
And it highlights another key takeaway from these letters,
Okay.
the importance of understanding your audience. Charles knew how to tailor his message to different groups,
Right.
whether he was addressing the Pope, his nobles, or even his enemies.
Right.
He understood the power of language and how to use it effectively to achieve his goals.
And sometimes those goals were surprisingly relatable.
Oh, yeah.
Like, remember that letter where he's complaining about the difficulty of finding good scribes? He's basically saying, can anyone in this kingdom write legibly?
It's a wonderfully humanizing detail.
Yeah.
Here's a king dealing with Viking raids, political intrigue,
Yeah.
and theological debates. And he's also struggling with the same bureaucratic frustrations we all face.
It makes you wonder what other everyday moments and personal reflections might be hidden within those stacks of letters. What were his hopes, his fears, his dreams?
Right.
We only get glimpses,
Yeah.
but they're enough to spark the imagination.
And that's the beauty of primary sources like these letters. They allow us to connect with the past in a personal and intimate way.
Yeah.
To see history not as a series of dates and events,
Right.
but as a tapestry woven from the lives and experiences of real people.
So by diving deep into these letters of Charles the Bald, we've not only uncovered a fascinating period of history, but we've also learned some valuable lessons about leadership communication and the enduring qualities of human nature.
Exactly. These letters remind us that the past is not some distant, irrelevant realm.
Right.
It's a rich source of insights and inspiration that can inform our understanding of the present and help us navigate the challenges of our own time.
And they leave us with a final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
We've heard Charles' side of the story,
Uh,
his perspective on events and relationships.
right.
But what about the other voices? What about his rivals, his enemies, those who saw him not as a wise and devout ruler,
Yeah.
but as a threat, a tyrant, or perhaps even a fool.
It's a reminder that history is never a single story. There were always multiple perspectives, alternative interpretations, and voices waiting to be heard.
Right.
And perhaps by seeking out those other voices, by exploring those alternative narratives, we can gain an even richer and more nuanced understanding of this fascinating period in history.